Today, so it happened and how Buddhism, Confucianism, and Christianity in Chosŏn Korea. I will start with some very general facts which probably are known to all of you, and then going on will sometimes, maybe in due time, go to more controversial things, to end with the most controversial statements at the very end. We'll build up to a kind of climax. There's something which you all have encountered, I'm sure. There's a popular assumption, a stereotype, which is not entirely untrue, like most stereotypes, but not completely true, that when the Chosŏn dynasty started at the end of the 14th century, the Confucianization of Korea started, and that Buddhism was pushed down in society, and that it could only survive thanks to its popularity among the common people. And Koreans in this period became more Confucian even than the Chinese. And then you certainly have come across Confucianism as a kind of explanation of the present state of Korea. And this is actually among academics at the moment very controversial, because Confucianism by itself is a very vague concept. People mean very different things when they use the word Confucianism. And I hope that maybe also at the end of the lecture I have made it a little bit clearer what the meaning of Confucianism in this case might be, as in how Confucianism maybe still could serve as a explanation, but especially actually what I will stress even more is that we have to be very careful using the term, and maybe in some ways shouldn't use it. The study of late Chosŏn Buddhism has been very much neglected, at least till about the year 2000. The last 10, 50 years, quite a lot of work has been done. And this work which has been done in recent years is that showing us that the dominance of Confucianism was not as strong as often thought. And I also will talk about certain developments, especially in the 18th and 19th century, which I think have been important, not just for the history of Confucianism, but also for the history of religions in general in Korea. I think that only if we pay attention to these new developments, we'll be able to understand certain things that happened, for instance, in the 20th century. I go back now to the very beginning, actually, of Buddhism in Korea. Most of you, I think, will be very familiar with the story how Buddhism and Confucianism entered Korea about the same time, and where it was often the same people who brought these two. For instance, in the early years, it was often Buddhist monks who also propagated what we now would consider to be Confucian values. But that ends when, at the end of the Goryeo period, actually already, when the Neo-Confucians have hegemonic claims and have often kind of see Buddhism rather as a kind of enemy, a competitor. And so this time there is real oppression of Buddhism to a certain extent after the 1392. And Buddhism certainly survived, but one thing you can say, and that I agree with, that it was relegated to the private sphere, but as I hope to show you, not the private sphere only of common people, but also of the elite, the royal family, the Yangban, the aristocracy, actually in all layers of the population. And part of what I'm going to, big part of what I'm going to tell you tonight is how did Buddhism survive, in what forms, and to what extent. first kind of list with examples on the left side, the oppression of Buddhism, which in some ways was very real. For instance, a lot of temple property was expropriated. The number of sects was reduced to the meditation and the study of sutras, basically. And Buddhist rituals were gradually excluded from the official state rituals. For instance, in the times of epidemics, originally in the Goryeo period, there was often a Buddhist ritual to get rid of the epidemic. That kind of thing did not survive in the Chosŏn period. There were also quite a few Confucian scholars who engaged in anti-Buddhist polemics, and the social status of monks became lower, and certainly of the common monks. So that's on the negative side. But then on the right hand the slide, you see the positive things. There was continued to be an intense involvement, certainly of the early kings of Buddhism. Just some examples. King Sejong composed a song about the life of the Buddha, the warning Chongang Jigok, the Song of the Moon reflected on 1,000 rivers. There was also a prose version made of it, and the prose version and the poetic version were combined in a work called the Warning Sokpo. And then the son of Sejong, King Sejong, had sutras translated into Korean, and he also collaborated on this prose biography of the Buddha I just mentioned. King Sejong actually is quite exceptional because he really was maybe primarily a Buddhist, although maybe not in his actions, because he was the one who killed his own nephew, who had become king himself. This is a picture which you find in some Korean temples on the outside. Actually, this is King Sejong. There's a story about him. And he was suffering from a kind of skin disease which gave him great discomfort. And once when he was at Ode-san, he was suffering from that so much that he, when he saw a little brook, he thought, well, I'll just bathe and maybe get rid of the worst itching. While he was doing this, a young monk appeared and said, I'll help you, I'll wash your back. And that's what we see in the picture. Then, when this had happened, the king was grateful, but he said to the young monk, you shouldn't tell anyone. And then the monk said, actually, you shouldn't tell anyone, I'm Manjushri. Manjushri is one of the bodhisattvas of wisdom who appears here in the guise of a monk. Oda-san was famed as a place where you could see a vision of Manjushri. So anyway, it shows that the King Sejong had this involvement with Buddhism. One thing that happened was that Buddhism learned quite quickly, actually, to adapt their defense of Buddhism in Confucian terms. So there is a monk called Kiha, they usually have long, complicated names, and he justified Buddhism by referring to a Confucian classics, the great learning, the Ta Shui, and Daehak in Korean. He said this, I perceive that the directives of the Tripitaka, the Buddhist canon, are intended to do nothing more than to prompt people to abandon passions and to realize their natures. If we teach people to cultivate themselves while relying on this doctrine, then their minds can be rectified, their persons cultivated, their families regulated, the nation ordered, and all will heaven peace. Everything that is in red is from the Ta Shui. Please tell me if it's not clear enough, and I should hold the mic closer to my mouth, I'm afraid. Okay. Okay, that's a lesson. sports. So then during the Chosŏn period, you have several monks who are important for the status of Buddhism, but also interesting when you want to know how the relationship between Buddhism and Confucianism was. For instance, Chosŏn was maybe the most famous among some people as the leader of the monks' armies against the Japanese invaders at the end of the 16th century. He wrote a book in which he argued that Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism all actually propagate the same reality, but in the end he said Buddhism is the highest form of these teachings, but basically they're the same. And there's a much less well-known monk called Qinwen, Zen or Song master, and his name, Qinwen, is taken from the analects. Qin is a pillow, and Quang is to use your arm as a pillow. So he wrote the following poem, in which I'll first read it. In the eating, of course, rice and the drinking of water, the using of one's elbow for a pillow, that's Qinwen. Joy is to be found, wealth and rank to be as passing clouds. Aspiring to the golden days of Amitabha, I listen to the wind in the branches. Everything in this poem, until aspiring to the golden days, is from the Lunyu, the sayings, the Analecta of Confucius. So he, in some way, he makes Confucius into kind of helper of Buddhism, not only in the, and there's this twist which makes the poem Buddhist. Then, about a century after that, there's a monk called Yondam Yui, who writes also an apology for Buddhism against Confucian objections. And he says that if you only practice Confucian virtues, you're a good son, a filial son, for instance, or a loyal subject to the king, then you'll go straight to the paradise, the pure land of Amitabha, as the Buddha who rules and preaches in this pure land. And in one of his letters he wrote to a Confucian gentleman, he said, it's not just the practice of Buddhism that leads one to paradise. And it's quite revolutionary, actually. In a way, he said, you don't have to go to be a Buddhist to go to the pure land. You will go there anyway if you're a good Confucian. You say you might think this was a kind of extraordinary thought of an unusual monk, but it's not like that, because there were many Buddhist kasa songs in the Chosŏn period, and in one of these songs you can find very similar ideas. And did you do your utmost and loyal service to king and country? This is a question asked by the judges of the underworld when they judge how you will be reborn after death. So were you filial to your parents, and did you uphold family customs? So here too it seems that it becomes clear that actually being a good Confucian or following Confucian virtues is essential also to reaching the pure land of Amitabha. Now we may ask, of course, whether this filial piety was completely extraneous actually to Buddhism originally, or whether it was something which you could also find in Buddhism quite early. And a case can be made that it was present in Buddhism already from the origin. But what is certain is that in China, where filial piety, of course, also was a great virtue, it was emphasized. And you see the influence of this till today. I took this picture at the Chogesa here, quite next door almost. And it was one series of panels, which you could see there about 2 years ago, with passages from a sutra, actually a sutra made in China. So not really the words of the Buddha, but apocryphal sutra, which argues that the debt you have towards your parents is so big that you can never completely repay your parents for it. So the panels show how the mother in all kinds of ways takes care of the little child. Parents, as many of you don't know, never cease to regard their own children as children. So even if the child is very old herself and bent already, the mother still says, take care, that you don't fall into the stream here. Buddhists also in the Chosŏn period had a chance in a way to show that there were paragons of loyalty when the Japanese invaded. It was not the first time in Korean history that monks actually took up weapons to defend the country, but in the invasions of the Japanese they did it quite successfully, and they were actually almost immediately the leaders of the monks' armies who were honored by the government in shrines which are called the Chosŏn, but then they use a different character of Sa. But there's in Leiden there's a temple which has taken up this cult of the monks as defenders of the fatherland. So one of these monks, I think many of you will have heard of him, was Sungkyunkwan. Chosŏn actually was too old to go fighting himself. Sungkyunkwan really went into the field to lead the monks' armies. And at the entrance of Confucianism University, you have the statue. At the bottom of the statue, there is the scene of the monks actually fighting. Now, if you think of the relations between Confucianism and Buddhism and shamanism, you see that there's this kind of overlapping within society between the way of thinking and some rituals. In Buddhism, you have the so-called Kapno Tenha. We'll see some examples afterwards. And the sweet jewel and nectar paintings. And these paintings were related to ritual, which was especially for people who had died before their time in a natural way because of illness, because they had been eaten by a tiger or drowned or something like that. Exactly the same kind of people were worshipped, also by Confucians. Maybe not completely correct to call it a Confucian ritual, but it was a ritual which was performed by Confucians by the government at the command of the king in many cases. It was called Yaojie, and this was performed from about 1400 till the beginning of the 20th century. It's not very well known nowadays, completely disappeared. But, so Confucians had something like that for the same class of people. And shamans also had it for what is often called young sun spirits, also people who had died before their time. In modern shamanic songs, for instance, among the young sun spirits, you have people who have been killed in war, crushed by a tank, for instance, or by machine guns and so on. So it's updated a bit, but the idea is the same. People who have died in a natural way before they have reached a ripe old age, needed a kind of pacification, otherwise they might pose a danger. And there was a kind of universal idea. Here you have one of these pictures. So here's the ritual itself. These are hungry ghosts. And this is the example of the restless spirits. Here, for instance, you have a guy who obviously is about to be devoured by a tiger. In many of these paintings, you have at the bottom, you have scenes from daily life. The deceased were also important for everyone, actually. So certainly for Confucians, the ancestors were important, but also for Buddhists and Shamanism, also the Chosån, the ancestors, are of great importance. What we see here is a print made in the middle of the 19th century. When you would read this, you can see it's the name of the woman who had actually commissioned the making of this print, and for whom she did it, for her deceased husband and several other relatives. It's a print actually made in Boudewijn with petal and so on, coax nowadays, in the past outside Seoul, frequented by many people from Seoul. And also prayers for the birth of children were a kind of field where Confucians and Buddhists could do the same things, because not to have children, to have people to perform the ancestral rituals was an example, was considered to be an example of lack of filial piety, and so it's also important for Confucians. And you see that also kings like King Chosŏn, who lived at the end of the 18th century, recognized Buddhist contribution in this respect. And here you see the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara who bestows a child on this couple who are devoutly praying for one. Now it's clear also when you look at many temples and when you look at the history of many temples that are still around, that these temples could not have been built, and the paintings in temples could not have been painted without powerful and rich patrons. And when you see a picture like this, it's absolutely obvious that it's not just the poorest in society, the illiterate peasants who patronized Buddhism at that time. There were certainly still prominent and wealthy patrons also in the 17th and 18th and 19th century. This is confirmed when you look at the book production in this period. There are many books, sometimes with illustrations, and these books were obviously made also for people who were able to read the Chinese text of most of these books. When you look carefully at these books, often in the margin you find names of people who have paid for printing that page. And so that's also a very good way to find out what kind of people were patronizing Buddhism around this time. The royal family, I already mentioned that the royal family went on to patronize Buddhism, and it was noted by Charles Allen Clark, who wrote the first substantial history of Korean religions. And he said it's interesting to note that even now, wherever you find a tomb, and it means a tomb for one of the kings or members of the royal family, you are pretty sure to find a temple just over the hill. And that is still actually when you can verify this near royal tombs, out of sight usually, but nearby. You always have what they call a wonchal, or a one-banga prayer temple for the life of the hereafter of the deceased. The interesting thing is that in the 18th century, some kings had tried to prevent people building these wongan, but they did it themselves all the same. For instance, King Yongjo was one of these kings, and he made the temple called Yonghasa, the Memchin Wonchal, had a great prayer temple for his predecessor Chosån, Chosån's consort,
And Chingwangsa, one of the temples here, also near Seoul, was the Wondang for his mother at Gongwangsa, and near Yonsei University was the Wondang for his grandchild. And nowadays, probably some of you have seen this film Sado, which is about Jongjo's father was killed by Yongjo, probably because he was insane and difficult to maintain at the court. Whatever the reason, King Jongjo was employed for about 10 years when this happened. He, after he came to power himself, he decided to honor his father by moving his grave to near Suwon, but also building a temple there, Yongju-san, so it's also the Wondang for his father. And he also had the sutra about filial piety, the Bumo and Dungyong, reprinted. Also here in Seoul, you can, there's a temple called Hancheonsa in Seongbukdong. It's now, it used to be outside the city, but it's now almost completely surrounded by high-rise apartments. And in the temple, you see this calligraphy. Maybe say it's not real calligraphy, but it's written by a 5-year-old. There's a figure called Yongqingwan. He never made it to become a king, but he was a royal son. There's a very long connection also between this temple, which really goes back to the beginning of the Chosŏn period, right to the end. So you see there's constant patronage from the royal family for Buddhism. So in the Chosŏn period, on the one hand, it's true that there were no, at the end, or after a certain moment, no longer any temples inside the city walls. So the city will have been purged, you might say, from all kinds of Buddhist influences. But immediately outside the city, there were scores and scores of temples. And people from the city would go there constantly. Sometimes these temples were very close, actually. There is still one called Chizan, maybe, or Chizan-sai, I can't exactly remember. It's about here, just outside the city wall. And the interesting thing is that also you see in descriptions of customs in, for instance, the 18th century of what happened in Seoul, that on the Buddha's birthday, everyone would hang out lanterns. And so people were, in a sense, Buddhist, that they did not have their temples right within the city walls, because what was inside the city wall had been made into a kind of Confucian sacred city. So I think many of you also know this place is very nicely located, although there's a kind of highway in front of it actually these days. But so there's also a connection with the royal family. If you go to the temple, and you see that there's a kind of legend how the Buddha helped the founder, for instance, of the Chosŏn dynasty. Then there were also some temples near Seoul, in Seoul at the beginning, for court ladies, for instance, widows, where court ladies who for some reason had not been married. And one of them is this temple that is also now inside the city, but outside the city wall. And the Chongyong-sa, the Samgak-san, that is actually in the middle of the city, but these days that was the place where the widow of King Tanzong lived after Tanzong had been sent to Yongwo, first in exile, and where he was, after a couple of years, was killed. So she lived there for a good 60 years. And they say that every morning, evening, I think, she would go up on a hill nearby, which now is called the Bongbong, the peak of looking towards the east, because her husband was in Dongbo, it was in Kangdong, so to the east. And this temple was not just for this widow, but it's also for other ladies from the court. Then the interest of intellectuals in Buddhism is also shown by this person, Kim Man-jung, the author of the Cool Monk and the Cloud Dream of the Nine, or the Ninth Cloud Dream sometimes, which shows that he had a great familiarity with the teachings of the teaching of the Diamond Sutra, which is that fundamentally we are already enlightened. We need only we need a kind of journey, and in the novel it's literal actually, to realize that we are enlightened. So I'm sure that many of you have read the Cool Monk. Remember, in the beginning is the monk who is reborn as a young man. Then he has a kind of journey in his life, and at the end of his life, he remembers what he has been in his past life. So in a way, he's back on the original point, but now he's enlightened. And then in the Diamond Sutra, you have this quotation at the bottom here: all is Dharma, illusion, the dream, the phantasm, bubble, shadow, evanescent as dew, transient as lightning, and must be seen as such. And you also have this in the novel that is quoted literally. So Kim Man-jung was a Confucian. He was also someone at certain times held high office, but he was also a Buddhist, I'd say. This person, what was he? He is usually known as a Shira, a pragmatic school scholar. He's also famous because at a certain moment he had an interest in Catholicism. Some people say actually that he remained kind of crypto-Catholic until the end of his life. But I look at it a little bit different way, because I think there is no exclusive choice to be made in these cases. In Chosŏn period, certainly. He was undoubtedly a Confucian also. He wrote commentaries to Confucian works and so on. His interest in that was great and very serious. He had this interest in Catholicism, and I think there's dispute whether he remained a Catholic or not. That was, until recently, has not been highlighted very much in some ways. He also, during his entire life, had a deep interest in Buddhism, which really already started in his, when he was very, very young as a child. And then at a certain period of his life when he's in court, there's not much sign of it, but when he goes into exile, it blossoms again. And he abundantly shows it at that time. So these two attitudes and the differences that you see on the left is his official pronouncement to Zhongzhou. As for monks and nuns, they have been notorious since olden times for exploiting innocent people, using talismans and chanting invocations. And this is against a certain form of Buddhism, you might say, but not against Buddhism per se, I think. But privately, in later years, he said that the pine leaf hat on, sitting suit made of pine leaves. I would rather delve into Buddha's teachings in my remaining years in the world rather than looking at all kinds of Confucian scriptures, for instance. So, in the first quotation also, this is again stating in other words, and he exchanged lots of poems and letters with monks, and some of them have been recorded also in the record of looking at the moon. And then he had famous friendships also with the monk Choi, this kind of Korean classic of tea, and he supported monks also materially. Some things related to Boudewijn. Boudewijn is also one of these temples which has this enduring relationship with the royal family. Basically, I think if you see a temple which has either Ku, country, or sometimes a king in the title, in its name, or in Bong, you can count on that there is some kind of connection with the royal family. And when you look carefully at what is left at Boudewijn, there's for instance this monument which commemorates the Boudewijn, the father of King Chosŏn, who was a benefactor of the temple. And the son Chosŏn had prayers said at the temple when his son was sick, and when he was healed, he said thanks to prayers of Subuksa, which originally had been the one who took John his first wife, the earlier king. He declared that filial piety and Buddhist faith and origin are not to Chosŏn, Shinichi, Hui. Also, when you have been to Boudewijn, you may have seen this calligraphy. It's reputed to be the last calligraphy done by the famous calligrapher Chosŏn Kim-jong-hee. The very last thing, when he was ill with death also. It's in a building which was made especially to house the wooden blocks on which the sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, was printed. It's very interesting to see who contributed to the thinking of the Avatamsaka Sutra, which was done by the priest of Nammo Yonggi. So it was supported by King Chosŏn and his consort, by the Queen Dowager, by the wife of the posthumous King Chosŏn. So the king would never really ruled, made king posthumously. By the father-in-law of King Hondong. And maybe for me at least most interesting is contributions that also been made by four former headmasters of the Confucian Academy, the Sungkyunkwan, and also by several other officials, of course also certainly in their public life there were Confucians. Very interesting person also is this man, Chosŏn, who is mainly famous, most famously as a painter. So the painting here is made by him. But he was also an intellectual who wrote a lot. His collected works also have been edited in a very nice edition 10 years ago, I think. And he thought actually that Confucianism was best, but that there were lots of things in Buddhism that were interesting. He liked the style of Buddhist writings, for instance. And he also thought that the Buddhist teachings are not so different from those of Confucianism. And he had actually a very interesting idea also. In Buddhism, you have the idea of upaya, skillful means. That means that whatever is helpful to you is good, is acceptable. And he said that actually Buddhism is a kind of upaya for Confucianism. So people who are not capable of understanding the principles of Confucianism completely, Buddhism will help. And so he used the Buddhist concept actually to argue for the superiority of Confucianism. But he certainly also himself at certain moments seemed almost like a Buddhist. So was Confucius in the Chosŏn period Buddhism oppressed and degenerated religion, which is often said so, especially in popular books, not so much more in this case in academic writing. You find counter evidence to this in many forms. I've given several examples already, but there's more. There are a lot of stories commemorating monks which have been written by Confucian scholars who had their names mentioned also, so they were not ashamed of commemorating the monks. Ibn Han, who wrote a big book in the early 20th century about the history of Korean Buddhism, and he notes that in the 19th century Sun meditation was extremely popular among intellectuals. And in the same period, so the second half of the Chosŭn period, of the 19th century, sorry, there were all kinds of lay associations and so on, who published books in Hanyun, so in Chinese basically. And when you look at these books, you see that the prefaces to these books are often written by Confucians, who start to say that maybe Confucianism and Buddhism are different, but, and then follows a long story arguing exactly the opposite. So there were many interfaces at the time that were Buddhist Confucian contact and dialogue. So academically, at least, there's a kind of consensus, I think, at the moment. This Chosŭn Buddhism, also in the second half of the Chosŭn period, was much more vital than it's often given credit for. And if you know this and realize this, then you understand that there was a stronger base for the regeneration of Buddhism in the 20th and 21st century. It was also easier to understand that culturally, actually, Buddhism for many people remained important. You see, you have an interesting phenomenon in Korea at the moment that, for instance, books by certain Buddhist writers, Boudewijn Walraven, the best example, are read by many people who actually are not Buddhists, but for instance Catholics or something else. Nothing wrong, but they still read these books. How this can happen? It's easier to understand if you realize that it actually is almost a natural thing. When you know that in the Chosŭn period, Buddhism did not go completely underground, so to speak. These are sort of a picture, especially the picture on the left, shows certainly a Confucian gentleman, but if you look very carefully, you see on the table there's a small Buddhist rosary in front of him. So, what I've been saying till now is I think most scholars, and I think I agreed about that, but now something which is a bit more controversial. Should we continue to regard freedom of mind and loyalty as Confucian virtues? Every time we find these things, should we still say that that's Confucianism? In my view, actually, maybe we should not. As one argument, you could say that it doesn't make much sense, maybe nowadays, to call Christianity a Middle Eastern religion. If you think of a Middle Eastern religion, we think of something quite different. So, of course, in origin it's Middle Eastern, but it has changed in the meantime. And there's actually a shaman who gave me a kind of insight in this problem at a certain moment. Pyongyang Harmony had this Pyongyang grandmother. She came to London in 1992 for a conference, and actually I saw the conference was for sale here. But anyway, she was there, and she performed the 13-day ritual, in which one part looked very much like Confucian Kesa. And the day after the ritual, people could ask her questions, and one lady asked what you did yesterday was a Confucian ritual. And then Chosŏn and Harmony was really, really puzzled. She was silent for about 40 seconds, I think. And then she said it was Korean chaser. And I think that's exactly the right answer. Huh? These things have become so universal, and that it doesn't make any sense anymore to call it Confucian. But it's not to say that Confucianism has not influenced modern Korean society. That is a different thing. But to say that at a certain moment these virtues were still Confucian, to me, doesn't make so much sense. If you look at late Chosŏn, we can look at it in different ways. And, is there a kind of rise of Buddhism or a regeneration of Buddhism, or is there a decline in the domination of Confucianism? The rise of Buddhism certainly is there up to a point. There's this public recognition I already mentioned of the contribution of the Buddhist armies in the struggle against the Japanese. There is widespread financial support for the rebuilding of temples from all kinds of layers of society. The Buddhist kasa, even lecture songs are quite popular. The interesting thing about kasa is that not many kasa actually were printed in the Chosŏn period. Only of some very famous poets like Sungkyunkwan, in his collected works. He also has a few kasa, but they're not widely distributed. But there are Buddhist kasa very widely distributed in Buddhist literature of the 18th century, especially. And there was this elite interest in Buddhist meditation, which was also noted by Inenha. There was interest in the more philosophical scriptures of Buddhism. There was printing of Buddhist ritual manuals, also quite a bit of research has been done about that. There were manuals in Hanmun, Chinese. And there was this printing I just already mentioned, actually, that these texts, or bilingual texts, to promote the veneration of the Buddha Amitabha, which also included kasa. So here you have one of these ritual handbooks. This actually is quite a bit older, it's the 15th century, quite old. This is Yonggul Golden. This is the 18th century text, which includes also kasa, which has, you can see, it's bilingual. First the original Hamburg text and then the translation. So it was printed and reprinted throughout the 18th century, something like six times. Bilingual, as I already said. And it promoted the kind of simple idea that the invocation of Amitabha, particularly at the moment that you are about to die, could ensure actual rebirth in the pure land of Amitabha, even for the worst of sinners, irrespective of gender or social status. Then there's something which is important for what I'm going to say afterwards. Rebirth in the pure land would put an end to the cycle of rebirth in lower forms of existence and ultimately to Buddhahood. Because if you are in this pure land, all day long you can listen to the preaching of Amitabha, and this prevents you falling back into a lower form of existence. So people often say that the basic idea of Buddhism is the idea of reincarnation, but actually when you're in the pure land there is no longer reincarnation, maybe as a kind of higher being, and you can become a Buddha, but or Arhat, disciple of the Buddha, but not into the lower form of existence. So you will no longer be reborn into an existence that really entails suffering. So now heaven and hell. So here you have a kind of concept of heaven. And on the left you see the depiction of that heaven is seen as a place where you listen to the Buddha, here seated on a lotus, and around you are plants and flowers and everything, and also many beautiful birds and very pleasant place, in contrast to hell, which you see here, where the sinners are cooked by the assistance of the judges of hell, who we see on here. I'll show you very how much time will be actually.
10 minutes.
Here you see also in the modern temple the depiction of people who are taken to the Pure Land, the dragon boat. Bodhisattva Confucianism, and here another depiction of a paradise, a Pure Land. One more. Very clearly you see as rebirth in paradise, or the Pure Land. And these, so again, it's the Amitabha in the middle, the two bodhisattvas who are helpers. This one is Chidam Kshitigarbha, who has made a vow that he will take people out of hell also. So even in the last moment, you can be saved from hell by Chidam. Is the bodhisattvas also who guides people to the Pure Land. So the persons who decide where you go are the 10 kings of the underworld, and actually better maybe to say purgatory than hell, but hell is easier. Heaven and hell also works better than hell, and heaven and purgatory. Because you're basically, you can stay maybe for very long periods of time in this purgatory, but it's not forever. There's still a possibility that you may go back to another existence. This is also a depiction of what may the freezing hell. Some hells are too hot, some hells are too cold. They're all very, very unpleasant. This is the punishment for slanderers. If you look carefully, you see that actually this is the tongue of the slanderer, drawn out, a plow, the sharp plowshare. And it goes on and on. Even if you're completely taken apart by these guys, the next time they will reconstitute you so that you don't suffer again. Here, this is also an older picture. This is actually a 16th century picture, but here you see many of the elements of the concept of heaven and hell in 2 pages or book. Here are people who obviously have been good, are bound for a good place, also like these people. But here, again, some sinners are cooked. Here you see some forms of reincarnation. So you can be born as an animal, you can be born as a kind of Titan-like figure, or in human form. Here you see one of the messengers of hell. On this side is what they call a karmic. You see them in temples, modern temples, quite often. So this will show what you have been doing, what bad deeds you have been doing in your life, like for instance killing a cow or butchering animals. Again, one of the sweet Jew paintings. This one emphasizes the ways of dying, for instance, in battle here. People are actually fighting with more or less modern weaponry, guns and so on. Here also hell, scenes from hell. And on the top here, always the Buddhas who make it possible to be saved after all. This is actually another picture from illustration from the Sutta about the importance of filial piety. When your parents have duty to organize all kinds of services in Buddhist centers, which will bring your parents in the end to a good place. And so here the son is carrying his parents to this mountain, which is also a good place in Buddhism towards these Buddhas. Now, when we look at this Buddhist contrast between heaven and the pure land and this purgatory, and then and we look at the descriptions in Buddhist Kasa, you see that there's a great emphasis on the vanity of our earthly existence. You cannot take all the riches you have. You may be very rich, wonderful house, and a nice wife, children, but when the time of death there, you have to go alone. It's a very short period of time. Your life, the image is often used, it's like a drop of dew on the tip of a spray of grass. And there's no one who can evade this fate. You may be a king or very rich, it will happen to you. But when you are devout, when you invoke Amitabha with full sincerity at the moment of death, if you do this 10 times, you have the time to do it 10 times with full concentration, you may be pardoned, even if you are the worst of sinners, a butcher or a murderer. And then something which I already mentioned, you will reach the pure land, you will never regress, you will be born into a lower existence. So it's almost a permanent state. And you probably know that in the 18th century, at the end of the 18th century, suddenly Catholicism is very successful in Korea. In a way, the Koreans convert themselves. Even before there were any missionaries in Korea, some Koreans decided to adopt Catholicism. How is it possible? And one part of the answer, of course, is that the Jesuits in China had written books in Chinese in which they presented Catholicism in a manner that was palatable to Confucian scholars. So that's certainly part of the answer. But then we noticed that actually quite early on, there were quite a few women as well who became Catholics. And if you think that in Buddhism, if they had any acquaintance with Buddhism, and most women have, they would be very familiar with the concept of heaven and hell, and also about the idea of the ultimate vanity of earthly existence. All there in the Buddhist Kasa, for instance. And then you also have this idea of the divine superhuman grace granting salvation to the truly contrite sinner, even in the moment of death, at the very late moment, after you have led a very sinful life, you can still be forgiven. And that was also part of Pure Land beliefs and Catholicism. It's a similar idea. So I think the success of Catholicism partly can be explained by pointing out that there were similar ideas in Buddhism. Anyway, there's also certainly a weakening dominance of Confucianism. So I've already argued that the core values of filial piety and loyalty are no longer exclusively Confucian. We've seen Buddhists propagating that. Shamans actually also do the same. And you see that there is a religious quest in all kinds of ways of complements of Confucianism or alternatives to Confucianism, and particularly when it's about the afterlife, what happens after death. So now, the fact that the Buddhist ideas were so popular, in a way, goes right against the Confucian grain, so to speak. Because Confucians had this idea that really you have to do your thing here in this life. And they didn't believe, they had a sort of kind of marginal belief in the existence of spirits, but they didn't believe mostly that spirits would exist long after death. So to them, actually, the here and now should be important. And the thing that should be left of you is your children, the works you have done maybe, but not some kind of existence of yourself after them. But to many people it's not an attractive idea, and I think that is one of the things that made Confucianism very vulnerable once the institutional support of the state had been abolished. And so Confucian virtues were no longer purely Confucian. Their ideas about what happens after death were not all that attractive to many people. So when Confucianism also, at a certain moment after 1894, is not no more the pathway to a beautiful, great career in which you maybe can become very wealthy as well. Confucianism suddenly is much weakened. And in fact, what you do see in the 20th century is that institutional Confucianism, where people who are what you might call hardcore Confucians, people who really regard Confucianism as their primary affiliation, they evaporate almost, they will become quite weak. I think at this moment, less than 1% of the whole population is 0.2 or something like that. Very small. So, when you look at the 20th century, there's this evaporation of Confucianism, which I already mentioned. Then I think that actually Protestantism, in a way, also profited from this basis laid by this Buddhist groundwork, as I put it here. Catholicism that profited from earlier. And then something which is very debatable, actually, I think, that there was a concept in Buddhism. It's not that there's no discrimination of women at all in Buddhism, but the Buddhist Casa, for instance, always emphasized that whether you're a man or a woman, old or young, you can reach the Pure Land. So in that sense, it was egalitarian. Maybe up to a certain point, it was less preparatory, also very ideal, maybe egalitarian society. Okay, that's actually basically the story.